Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvada Om Ganganapate Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Swaminarayanaya Namo Namaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya Om Namah Shivaya Sarva Mangala Mangalle Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanidrambike Gauri Narayani Namostute Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Sadgurubhyo Namaha Om Gunatito Aksharam Brahma Bhagavan Purushottamah Jano Janannidam Satyam Muchyate Bhavabandhanat Om Shri Sajananda Swami Maharajaya Namo Namah Om Shri Hari Krishna Maharajaya Namo Namah Om Shri Lakshmi Narayanaya Namo Namah Om Shri Krishna Narayanaya Namo Namah Om Shri Nar Narayanaya Namo Namah Om Shri Sadgurubhyo Namaha Om Shri Parama Sadgurubhyo Namo Namah Om Namah Shivaya Om. Welcome to Vachanamrut Nirupan Vachanamrut Discourses. This is Sachin, and today is the 5th of August 2022. Welcome to SwaminarayanSpirituality.com, which is the website connected with all these recordings. Please note that, as a disclaimer, there is no attempt to criticize or promote the teachings of any particular religious group or organization in making these recordings and talks. All right, so first of all, I want to offer my obeisance, prostrations to all the incarnations of God, to all the great sages, to Bhagavan, God existing in the heart of all, and of course to Sajanand Swami Maharaj, whose teachings we are looking at very carefully, who is also known as Bhagavan Swaminarayan. And the attempt here on my part is to introduce the teachings, the life, the teachings, primarily the spiritual teachings of Sajanand Swami on a much broader platform in the English language for the purpose of trying to make sure that the wide audience can understand the background, the teachings, the spirituality, particularly without organizational differences or without language barriers or even cultural barriers. So with that in mind, we're continuing our exposition on Vachanamrutam. As mentioned in the last two introductory talks, Vachanamrut is composed of two words, Vachan plus Amrut, words that are nectarine. They are going to give Amrut. Amrut meaning words that liberate from the cycle of birth and death. So we are going to begin today, Vachanamrut, line by line. We will go through, by the grace of God, the whole text, one line at a time, without skipping any pieces, and I will try to interconnect the different ideas together with other scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Advaitic texts also, plus Ramanujacharya's texts, and many other great texts and teachers from throughout the world. You will find in the Vachanamrut that in brief language, all the essence of hundreds and hundreds of scriptures is all embedded within this. All right, now to begin with, we will begin with the very first Vachanamrutam, and that is Gadhada, Pratham number 1. Now what does that mean? Gadhada is the name of a village. That is where Maharaj meaning Sajanand Swami, he lived for many, many years over there. He stayed there, and quite a bit of the Vachanamrut in 3 parts, Pratham, Madhyam, and Antya, is spoken in the village of Gadhada. There is a temple there of Gopinath Ji Maharaj. It is a temple of Bhagavan Krishna, and actually there's a history behind that image and that murti with Sajanand Swami also, which we will get into later on about the Swarup of Maharaj as we move ahead. But anyway, there's a lot of interconnected history behind all of this. But we want to move into the spirituality of the Vachanamrut particularly. So this first Vachanamrut is in Gadhada, and it is called Gadhada Pratham. Pratham meaning the beginning section. And there are 78 discourses in this particular section, the very first section. There are 78 discourses. Right. So just as a reference, there are wonderful websites online as well as many apps of Vachanamrut for those who are interested in reading the text. I will be going through it myself here, line by line, in Gujarati and in English. Right. So here we go. So I will first speak in the Gujarati language because that is the original language and I can read this actually. And then I will try to give a very proper, impartial, clear translation and exposition from my perspective on what these words all mean, what these sentences mean. So here we go. I'll speak it in Gujarati, then I'll go into the English version and then go from there. So Swaminarayan Hare, Swaminarayan Hare. Sambat 1876 માક્ષર સુધી 4 ચતુર્થીને દિવસ શ્રીજી મહારાજ શ્રી ગરડા મધ્યે દાદા ખાચરના દરબારમાં સાધુની જાયગાને વિશે રાત્રિને સમયે પધાર્યા હતા અને સર્વ શ્વેત વસ્ત્ર ધારણ કર્યા હતા અને પોતાના મુખારવિંદની આગળ સાધુ તથા દેશના હરિભક્તની સભા ભરાઈને બેઠી હતી. This is the Gujarati language. The translation is as follows. On the night of Makshar Sudi 4, Sambat 1876, which is a moon calendar, that is the lunar calendar. The calendar that we use is the solar calendar, and that date is November 21st, 1819. Shriji Maharaj is the same as Maharaj or Ghansham Maharaj or Swaminarayan. I've mentioned it before. I hope you'll keep that in mind. Shriji Maharaj has come to the residential hall of the sadhus in Dada Khachar's Darbar in Gadhada. So who is Dada Khachar? He's a householder devotee. There's a lot of history and story behind each individual. We will not go into that right now. So Dada Khachar is a very devout, like a local king, kind of, So, and the Darbar is, I think that's a Muslim word, actually. I don't think that's even like a traditional Hindu word as such. But I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But that is, the kings had these darbar. Darbar is like the court of the king, essentially. That's what that is referring to. So it's something like that. So Dada Khachar was like a regional, like a local, I would have to say king of some sort. But he's the head of a particular province or something like that. Not a province, a particular area. And Gadhada is the village. That is where, or village or town maybe you can say at that time. So every Vachanamrut begins with a description of the date, what Maharaj was wearing, who was sitting there in front of him. So it's a very accurate description because there's a good record of where he was. All right, so the next line here is that Shriji Maharaj was dressed entirely in white clothes. Now why is that? That is a symbol of Sattvagun, the Sattvagun, Rajogun, Tamogun, the Sattvic lifestyle. That's one meaning. But there's more to it than that. Maharaj preferred lots of white clothes, but many other types of clothes were worn for the purpose of the pleasing of the devotees. But the clothes are always a type of representation. It's also a state of mind. Like if we wear white clothes, there is a certain aura behind that. There's a certain simplicity in that. So that it can have that meaning. It has some other meanings also, which we'll talk about later. So he was dressed entirely in white clothes. At that time, an assembly of sadhus as well as devotees from various places had gathered before him. So many sadhus, devotees, there were householder devotees, and there were the paramansas, the tyagis. Tyagis are those who have taken renunciation, who are on the path of renunciation. They're still living in the world like anybody else, but they have special rules. Their names are spiritual names, and their main task is to realize the ultimate truth and to serve the society. Seva and bhakti are their main tasks, and that is how they progress further. And so Maharaj is sitting with them, and in this particular first Vachanamrut, what do we find? We find that he is getting up at night time. Now I don't know what time that is at night time. That reference may be there in some other scriptures, exactly what time that was. But it is at night time, and you can see that Maharaj is getting up at various times, whether it's at nighttime, daytime, whether there's katha going on, kirtan going on, other things going on. So he's beyond time. That's what this all means. That he's inspired to ask a question, to give a discourse, to talk to the devotees. It's an inspiration that comes from within. That is krupa, that is grace. So he's gotten up at night time and he's asking a question. Now, what exactly is this very first question? Well, this first question is of paramount importance because it is the ultimate question that anyone can potentially ask. So I will read that and then we'll go into the question itself, and then step by step we'll move into it. Today we will spend time just on trying to understand that question, and then we'll go from there. So in Gujarati, it is written like this: Pashi Shriji Maharaje prashna પૂછ્યો છે, સર્વ સાધનમાં કયું સાધન કઠણ છે. The translation of this, Maharaj is asking the question about sadhana and the word sadhan. Now, what does this mean? So the word sadhana is spiritual practice. It's actually physical and psychological practice. So for example, if you're doing some meditation using breathing, alternate nostril breathing, any kind of breathing practice, any type of yogic practice, bodily postures, anything that is done, such as mantras, such as prayers, fasting, observing celibacy, being careful about what to speak, how much to speak with caution, all of that, every action of the mind and the body, in short, that can be performed, any action mind and the body performs, in an attempt to realize the Atma and the Paramatma, to realize the Self, to realize the Brahman, to realize the Akshara Brahman, to realize the Parabrahman. That is called sadhana. So sadhana is the practice itself. For example, Sachin right now is trying to talk about this Vachanamrut. It's a type of reflective sadhana, reflection on the words. So the mind is being used, the intellectual power is being used. Why? The intention is to serve the society and to please God. Two intentions. That's all. There's no other intention behind this. So that is a type of sadhana. Now the word sadhan is relevant here. Shriji Maharaj, he's asking sarva sadhanma, kayu sadhan kathan che. He's saying out of all the different types of spiritual practices, which is the most difficult? Now obviously, there is no end to the number of sadhanas. If you look at the traditions of the world, in any tradition, people are performing various types of religious and spiritual and meditative activity to go further and to realize a greater state of mind, greater state of living, being, to please God, to be more connected with God, to be more in communion with God, as the Christian tradition would say. So this Vachanamrut, these questions in the Vachanamrut are for the whole of humanity. And we need to understand carefully why the questions are asked as they are, and from what perspective, what situation, and what is the intention of Maharaj. We shall try to uncover in this. So first of all, anyone who is performing sadhana, they're trying to improve themselves and trying to realize and awaken into a higher state of consciousness. That is what is meant by sadhana. Now, when Maharaj is saying sarva sadhanma, sarva means out of the whole range of sadhanas. There's thousands of them. Being charitable, serving needy people, memorizing scriptures throughout the world. There's no end to that. Following strict rules, what is called dharmaniyam. Being very cautious about what to eat, what not to eat, what to hear, what not to hear, all that, what to speak, what not to speak. All of this is part of sadhana. Now, he's asking the question about difficulty. What is the question about? Out of all of the innumerable activities that are performed by people throughout the world and people in satsang or in different modalities, what sadhana or which sadhan meaning the tool, the approach taken, the activity to be done, which one out of the many is the most difficult? It's difficult. It's the has maximum difficulty. So he's asking about difficulty. Now, why is he saying that? See, sarva sadhanma kayu sadhan kathan. Kathan shape. Look at the word kathan. Kathan means difficult. It's hard to do. The first point in this is that any sadhana has some difficulty. It creates some resistance. For example, if I take a rosary bead and I take one mantra, whichever mantra, Swaminarayan mantra, Krishna mantra, Shiva mantra, Devi mantra, or the Jesus prayer, or any mantra. In every religion there are different prayers. If I decide, or when I decide I want to chant one rosary bead of a particular mantra, like Namah Shivaya mantra, for example, or Swaminarayan mantra. So you do the mantra. As soon as I start doing that, there's so much activity psychologically going on in my mind of all kinds that is taking me away from that mantra. So for example, if I say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, as I'm speaking this mantra, my mind is thinking of other things. There's changes going on in my body. The digestion is going on in my stomach. The body is not a static phenomena. So the body itself is going through physiological activity. The mind is changing also. The mind has so many emotions and feelings and thoughts and memories. It's a massive world, the internal world. And in the Energy and Personal Excellence program, we've talked about thought, emotion, memory, desire, and energy, the 5 points. These are internal aspects of the inner world: thoughts, emotions, memory, desire, energy. So when we are doing any sadhana, there is going to be some level of difficulty. It could be very slight or it could be extreme. So it's a range. It's not one or the other. It's a range. It is in a continuum. Any sadhana is going to create some resistance. Now, what does that mean? If I take a mantra and say Om, Om, just the Om mantra, for example. If I say I want to do 3 rounds of the Om mantra, I can do it, but some part of me will want to think of something else, do something else, some other thought will come. What will happen next from 1 hour from now? Mind will jump between the past and the future. So this is one of the problems. We want to understand the question carefully before we can get into the actual solution. We cannot really thoroughly understand or even grasp the power of the answer until we understand and thoroughly move into the question itself. So, when a decision is made to perform sadhana, without decision, nothing happens. So there's something called decisional balance. Should I do this? Should I not do this? For example, if someone has to do a fast on the Ekadashi day, in Gujarati it is called Agyaras. There are 2 times a month when this Ekadashi comes. So most of the Vaishnavas and the Swaminarayan devotees and others also, most of them, if they're following their particular structure, they usually do a full fast, or they do fast with fruits and water and milk and maybe some other materials that are non-grain materials, non-grain food items. So if you decide to do a fast or to have a limited amount of food, a particular type of food, there's some rules and regulations around that. Your physiology of the body and the conditioning of the mind and the natural tendency is going to fight against that. It's not going to like that. So you start doing it, you may have the intention to do it. You say, okay, I'm going to do it. I believe in God. I believe in the satsang. I want to do this fast. You start doing the fast, wait until 12 o'clock comes. Now you're hungry. Your mind is jumping in 10 different directions, is thinking of so many different foods. Right? Isn't it so? That's what is meant by this word kathan. We are just understanding this word kathan right now. Kathan means difficulty. And the difficulty is there in every sadhana. Because of our natural tendency to go in so many different directions. So what does that imply? It implies that sadhana is an attempt to place the body and the mind in a particular direction. Obviously, if you look at the question carefully, it's a seemingly simple question. But if you probe into the sentence, that is called Manan Chintan, we will uncover so much more. And that is the power of Vachanamrutam. Vachanamrutam is not long. This first Vachanamrutam is just 2 pages long, or maybe 3 pages long. That's all. So it's not the quantity of what is written; it is the quality of what is written and the invitation to probe into the sentences themselves. And this approach should be taken with any scripture, whether it is a scripture such as Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, or any scripture, and in a more general sense, if we're reading any book, if you take just a book on a particular subject, you can read it one time all the way through. Then if you probe further and further, you could spend years studying all the ideas in that one book. So the general idea is to open as clearly as possible every word. And we are going to do this with Vachanamrut by the grace of God and all the gurus for the purpose of presenting to the world the extraordinary spirituality and the applicability of that spirituality in day-to-day life. Now, the first question itself is about the practicality of living a spiritual life. Anyone who is wanting to live a spiritual life is going to do sadhana. It doesn't matter what religion, what tradition, what sampradaya, or which parampara. It makes no difference in that sense. Somebody decides that they want to go to a church every Sunday. That's a sadhana. They were never going before, now they've decided to go. Now somebody decided they want to start reading the Bible. That's a sadhana. Somebody says they want to start reading the Gita. That's a sadhana. Someone has decided they want to listen to spiritual discourses online or go to some place to do so. That is sadhana, Shravan Bhakti. That is the listening bhakti. Bhakti meaning devotion. So the question is a very relevant and it's a very fascinating question, because Maharaj is not asking to name all the sadhanas. See what the question is not. The question is not to name just, what are all the sadhanas. If you would have asked that question, then a whole list could be given by the sadhus and the brahmacharis and the grahasthas. If somebody was to ask us this question, we could also make a big list. So he's not asking that question to list all the sadhanas. He's also not asking which is the easiest sadhana. See, he's asking what is the most difficult sadhan. Sadhan, meaning the activity of the body and the mind together in an attempt to realize God. How is that to be done? Now, Maharaj's approach is definitely monotheistic. That there is God with form, that is Bhagwan, that is Paramatma, Parameshwar. And there's only one God, not two. God is not two. There's not polytheism, henotheism. It's not, even the notion of monism. It's not that. It is a monotheistic, but it is called qualified monism or qualified non-dualism, but which is really, it has monotheistic idea in there. So that is a more profound subject. We will get to that later as we move into the answer itself. But right now, all we want to understand is the question. that when those who are trying to realize higher consciousness, that's a general idea. Now, higher consciousness could just be more opening of the mind into a greater awareness. Where is God in that? There may not be any notion of God in that. So that is one way to think about this word sadhana. Maharaj is not putting that question in that sense. So that's another thing I want to clarify. He's not asking the question in an abstract sense. He's asking the question in terms of connecting with God. He's asking in terms of realizing the reality of God. God, the Brahman, the Atman. He's asking the question in that sense. So the reason I mention that is because there are quite a few even Buddhist practices, Shinto practices and Zen practices that don't have much to do with God. They have nothing to do with God, really. They're just about stabilizing within yourself and being more aware and getting into just a clear state of mind, and then the mind kind of disappears. And then you also disappear and there's nothing there. Or what is there is not spoken by the Buddha. So that kind of sadhana is not what Maharaj is talking about. He's not rejecting those sadhanas also. They are also there. He's mentioned that in terms of awareness and Jan Purnam. There's places where he's mentioned those approaches. But those approaches can be a support to connecting with the ultimate reality that is God. So his belief or his teaching, his approach is that there is one God. Just like in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and in the Bhakti Sampradayas of Sanatana Dharma, of the Hindu tradition, the notion that there is God that is beyond and transcendent to everything, this is running through the whole Vachanamrut. And the question of sadhana is in connection with that notion that there is one supreme God. All right, so we'll keep that in mind. We'll keep that in the background. So, sadhana is going to create resistance. This is what we were talking about. Resistance is there. There's going to be some friction. We ultimately want to get out of that friction. So, Vachanamrut has three things that it talks about always. The nature of bondage, the nature of liberation, the state of liberation, what it is like. The state of bondage, what it is like. And the process of coming out of bondage or bandhan into liberated state, mukta state. These three things are discussed. You will find that again and again and again. Here, this question is about the second point, about how to come out of the bondage state into the mukta state. So, in every Vachanamrut, you will find one or more of these three. The nature of bondage, nature of bandhan, how to come out of that bondage, and the nature of liberation, a description of a liberated state. All right. So, when we try to understand this question a bit further, the problem of difficulty is also implied in this. That so many people, if you look at India, for example, there are people who go to these tirth. These are holy places. They go barefoot. They're walking long distances. You see this today. This is the reality. They're doing fasting. They're charitable. They're singing bhajans, kirtans. In every part of India, this is there. In Maharashtra, it is there. In Gujarat, it is there. In all the south states, it is there. In the Bengal, it is there. People are doing all kinds of sadhana. In Bengal, for example, you have the Durga Upasana. There's so many thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are worshipping Goddess Durga. And the mantras that are done, the bhajans that are done. There are so many ways in which God is worshipped. So every kind of worship, every kind of attempt to worship God, that is devotion. Worshipping God is called bhakti. So bhakti can also be considered to be a sadhana. As opposed to simply doing a fast without thinking of God or anything, just for health purposes. Yes, you can say that is a sadhana for your own development, or like in the Jain tradition. The Jaina tradition doesn't believe in God. There is no concept of God in the Jaina tradition. It is an atheistic tradition, but it believes in the Atma. So they consider the Atma as God, if you want to use that word God, or they use the word Bhagwan sometimes, but they don't think of God or Bhagwan as something transcendent to everything. That's not their approach or not their teaching. So when they are performing sadhanas of ahimsa, brahmacharya, fasting, so many things, they're doing it to realize the Atma, to realize who I am. Even their devotional practices are all aimed ultimately towards that, to realize who you are, know thyself. And that's it. And once you realize yourself, you're done. So that is what Jainism is about. There is no notion of Paramatma beyond the Atma in the Jaina tradition. So Maharaj in another Vachanamrut, Gadhada Madhya 18, has talked about that, about the Nastik and Astik. So Nastikas are who do not believe in the Vedas, who do not believe or accept the authority of the Vedas, and as such, then there is really no belief as such in a supreme God, in a supreme being. That belief is there in the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It is there in the devotional sampradayas that are emphasizing bhakti in the Hindu tradition. But the other meditative traditions and other atheistic traditions, or even just meditative, or those who believe only in the Atma, they do not accept anything as God, separate or beyond. That should also be kept in mind. So when we're asking the question of sadhana, there are all of these broad points to keep in mind, based on where somebody's coming from. Because it's very possible that maybe some years from now or whenever, somebody might be listening to these talks, and somebody could be from other traditions, from other backgrounds, and I want to try to make sure I try to present the teachings of Sajanand Swami in the right context. That what perspective is he talking about, and what are the other perspectives also? You see, and then why is he talking about that particular perspective? So we can elaborate on that. Now, there's a couple of other things here. The difficulty that one experiences in performing practice, that difficulty is occurring due to the natural tendency of the mind, its desires, to continue its momentum in the same direction it has been going in for long periods of time, for years and years and years, for lifetimes. So sadhana is an attempt to change the direction of the momentum of thoughts, emotions, memories, desires, and raw energy that is fueling that momentum to change that direction. Any sadhana. That is called sadhana, because the direction, if it continues in the same way, it will keep the individual bound. Here's an example. If, for example, I had an argument with somebody last year or 2 years ago, let's say it was a serious argument. So that argument stays in the mind. And from time to time, there are things that come about that you're reminded of that. Then you start to think, well, should I have said this? Why did I say this? This person said this. What could have happened? Then you feel guilty. Then you feel shame. You feel that anger also. You feel, no, I'm right. I'm justified. Even if it's a small argument, the mind goes back to that again and chews it up again, and it relives it again, and the ego gets involved. It's a massive mixture. It happens very quickly, very rapidly. That massive mixture of just even one thought going back into a memory, that mixture is connected with the sadhana you're trying to perform. So Sachin says, I want to perform a mantra, Swaminarayan mantra, 6-syllable mantra, or Sri Krishna Sharanam Mama, this 8-syllable mantra, Sri Krishna Tvam Gatir Mama, another Ashtakshara mantra. Om Namo Narayanaya. Any mantra. Let's just take that as an example. I start doing the mantra. All of a sudden, before you know it, the mind swings back to that argument, back to this, back to that. This phenomena is also discussed in this Vachanamrut as we move forward, in this very first Vachanamrut only. So Vachanamrut is for those who are performing sadhana, is for those who are wanting to perform sadhana, is for those who are trying to realize God. It is for sadhakas. Sadhaka is one who is wanting to evolve himself or herself into the state of the Brahman, into the state of higher consciousness. That is called a sadhaka. Vachanamrut is not light reading. It is a highly contemplative book for those who are actually performing sadhana. Then it is going to be 100% applicable. Otherwise, it will remain concept-oriented. Somebody could do a dissertation on Vachanamrut and not do any sadhana. Can understand the concepts, not do any sadhana. Can understand the ideas, just like there are scholars of the Bhagavad Gita. But they're not necessarily worshipping Krishna or doing sadhana. Yes, they're doing sadhana in that sense of studying the scripture and understanding the academics behind it. That's fine. But that's a whole different matter as opposed to someone who is intentionally, deliberately, carefully, and based on decision to say, I, as a human being, as a person, is going to perform sadhana to please God, to move ahead in my spiritual life. Vachanamrut is for that kind of person. And remember, Maharaj is speaking from his own state. He has mentioned in Vachanamrut, Mari pratyaksh detail vache. I have seen and I'm showing you. I have seen and I'm showing you. And I'm talking. He also said, I have mastered these ideas through my anubhav, which is a guidance for us. Anubhave karine siddha kare liche. He's very clear. His emphasis is on anubhav. And we will go more into that further. But at the very outset of this Vachanamrut, we want to keep attention on direct first-person experience. First-person phenomena, first-person realization, first-person interaction with others. That is how the evolution further will occur. So the attempt to move ahead spiritually, that is sadhana. Now, another interesting point I do want to just mention here, which we will talk about further. That God, if we believe in God, that in Vachanamrut this teaching is there, and in all Swaminarayan scriptures it is there, and in many other scriptures same thing is there. That if there is God, and Maharaj is saying there is one supreme being, that is Bhagwan, there is no sadhana that can take you there. Now we have a big problem with this. On the one hand, there's all of this spiritual practice being done, different sadhanas being done. All kinds of things are being done. On the other hand, even in the Christian tradition, I think Jewish tradition, and all the theistic, monotheistic traditions in the Sanatana Dharma, including Swaminarayan Sampradaya, there is a very clear teaching in Vachanamrutam that no sadhana can take you there. Sadhana can take you only to certain stage, that's it. And then you cannot reach God by your efforts. This is the basic idea. So that is also implied in this question, that you can try to place all efforts as you want. And it's not that you shouldn't place any efforts also. But simply by performing efforts, by taking step 1, step 2, step 3, and taking, let's say, 200 steps, and you're taking like a sequential, methodical, mechanical process, you will eventually get to God. That's not going to happen. That is what is the opinion or the perspective of Sajanand Swami. Now, somebody might disagree with that. Since I'm trying to present this objectively, it is very possible that some other people, like in the Jaina tradition as an example, they place a lot of emphasis on sadhana, and many other traditions also. And they believe in gurus, they believe in the great sages and all that, and they believe in the grace of the gurus and all those things. But they don't believe that there is God who is going to liberate you. Here, in the Vachanamrut, there is a very clear teaching, and perspective of Maharaj, or his realization, that it is by the krupa, the grace of God, Bhagwan, God meaning Bhagwan. I'm using the word God like easy to understand, but the word is Bhagwan, Parameshwar, Paramatma, Aksharatit Paramatma, the one supreme being. It is by the grace of that supreme being that one realizes that supreme being. It is not by efforts. Well, if that's the case, so many questions come about. Why doesn't God simply liberate everybody? Why create all this sansar and this world and all the universes and the creation? Why is that even there? It's a natural question. We will hold that question for now, because we will get into that question as we move ahead. There are very clear answers to this, and very interesting ones. But anyway, that's a question. Another question then becomes, if it's just all happening by the will of God, if God is the one, Bhagwan is the one who's going to liberate us and free us and whatever it is, and also that sadhana doesn't take you there, then why should I do anything? Why do any bhajan, kirtan, seva, bhakti, sadhana of any kind? Build temples, go to temples. It's just, if all of my effort is not going to produce the result that I'm looking for, that is to see God face to face, why should I do it? See the question. It's a very relevant and very applicable question. Well, this is not the easiest question to answer, but we will try to answer this question right now. Sadhana is activity that is related to God, or satsanga, listening to discourses, listening to the gurus. Why is that? Because the straightforward answer is that our jivatma, is in bondage of Maya from beginningless time. This is the answer to this question. The actual answer. Now we will open it further. Let's be clear about what we're talking about. First, there is this notion that there's the one supreme God. Just keep that in mind right now. There's the one without a second. There's only one supreme being, actual being, that is God. That is Bhagwan, Parameshwar, Paramatma. That supreme being has one of its powers called Mahamaya. So Mahamaya is the great power of God. It's an infinite energy. And within that Mahamaya, infinite number of Chaitanya Jeev and Chaitanya Ishvara are residing, meaning the Atma Tattva, spiritual sparks. We can think of it this, but it's not a spark. It is the same substance as God. Satchidananda Brahma, truth, consciousness, bliss. God is considered to be Satchit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. And we are also Satchit Ananda. The difference is we are within the realm of Maya. When did we come into Maya? As per Vachanamrut. I'm going to stick to Vachanamrut, and I'll show you the other perspectives also. There is no particular time within which we came into Maya. We have been inside the womb of Maya. The Garbha is called, Maya no Garbha. Inside the womb of Maya from beginningless time. That means God was not created by anybody. Obviously, that would be meaningless to say that. God is Sanatana, eternally existing. Not created or destroyed. Creation and destructions are within the realm of time. That's a different topic. We will get to that later on. Our self, who we are as the jiva, as the spark of divinity, or the atma, that is from beginningless time, from beginninglessness, it's called anadi. The word in Vachanamrut is anadi. So the word adi means beginning. In Sanskrit, it means beginning. Anadi means beginningless, beyond time. So there is no particular point in where the Jivatma has actually gotten into Maya. It is also not the case that Paramatma has degraded into the Jivatma, as per Vachanamrut. This is why Sajanand Swami is talking about and has accepted Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism. What I'm describing to you are the tenets of qualified non-dualism. The Advaitic perspective is different from this, but there is also a bridge between the two, which is also in Vachanamrut, which we'll talk about later. Right now, the point that I'm trying to convey simply is that the question of sadhana, that sadhana doesn't take you to Paramatma. Because what is sadhana? It is within the realm of Maya. Is using the material of Maya, the body, the senses, the world, whatever it is. So, and it's an effort given that is performed by the me. The me that is performing effort, that is called sadhana. And so there's another intimation here of the me. The reason that sadhana is difficult is because of the me, that I am performing it. Now, of course, there are difficult sadhanas by themselves, but when the me is not present, that is something tremendous. We will, again, later on, we'll get to that. So, but the difficulty in many ways is because of the me. So that's one thing to understand. If the me is not there, the difficulty would still be there, but it would not be as difficult. There would still be some level of effort and whatnot. But anyway, if salvation or moksha or mukti is grace-based, it is by the krupa of God, then the question would be, why doesn't God just take all the infinite number of jivas in the Mahamaya and just absorb inside, just liberate everybody in one shot? Why not? This question is asked in Vachanamrut also by Purushottam Bhatt. There's a whole Vachanamrut on this called Purushottam Bhattna Prashna. I believe it's Gadhada Madhyas, number 64, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, we will not be able to understand that question just that easily. Like, why God doesn't do that? Can He do that? As per Vachanamrut, yes. It is called Anyatha Kartum Shakti. He can do anything He wants. Why doesn't He? This is a big criticism from atheists against the theistic religions. And there, in the modern world, there are several people like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and some others. Daniel Dennett. These are the big atheists. And if you read their books and try, it's very possible, including Sam Harris, it's very possible that one would completely get rid of the theistic religions from the mind. That is how convincingly they have written them. There's a basic question. If God is present, why is there so much pain and suffering and problems, and why create all this world and all this mess there? And then on top of that, people have to perform sadhana and people have to do this and go to gurus and scriptures, and why go through all this thing? Is God such a person, such a being that is incapable of just liberating everybody? And for what possible reason? Why would anybody create this nature, this hierarchical nature, one species dependent on another? Why? Is God incapable of removing all of this? These are the questions. I just stay with the questions for now. Further questions on this. If we are saying that there is Mahamaya, where did it come from? Well, the Vachanamrut is answering this question that Mahamaya is also beginningless. It didn't come from anywhere. It exists as old as God is. Old meaning that God is Sanatana, eternally existing. Bhagwan is eternally existing. And Mahamaya is also eternally existing. But Mahamaya is dependent on God. It cannot exist without God. And the Jivatma are also dependent on God. Now, the interesting part about Vishishtadvaita, and this is a very interesting part, this comes in the Vachanamrut later on, but I'll just mention it here, that who we are, the Jiva, and the infinite number of Jivas, and the Ishvaras, we'll talk about that later, what that is. They are all part of the body of God. It's called Shariri. Now, this is even more interesting. That if there is only one being, that is the Supreme Being, that we are actually living inside that one being, in parts of that being, in different parts of that infinite being. We're living as the body of that being. We are in that body. We are part of that body. That is the body of God. Bhagwan ka sharir. Now somebody might say, God has a body? What does that mean? Another big subject. That's another massive topic in itself. But we just are trying to open this carefully. That if God is there, if Mahamaya is there, and the Jivatma are there, and they are Anadi, if God didn't create them, they are just existing eternally. I think that's a meditative thing to look at. Just to meditate and reflect silently on the possibility that Bhagwan or Paramatma is independently existing beyond Mahamaya and beyond all the multiple universes, infinite universes and all, beyond all the creation, is an independent being and is always independent. And as one of its powers has Mahamaya, and so much, the Akshara Brahma, the Muktas, and all the liberated beings, and all the different abodes, and so much description is there. But it's all part of the body of God. So then you are left with an Advaitic viewpoint. That is why it is called Brahma Vishishtadvaita. The actual Vedantic terminology for the Vedanta of Swaminarayan, Sri Swaminarayan, is Brahma Vishishtadvaita. Sometimes it is called Navya Vishishtadvaita. And there was also a book published by the BAPS organization many years back called Navya Vishishtadvaita. And I do have a copy of that. In fact, there is even the online website that has that entire book on there. So that is a much more elaborate description of all of this. But the actual Vedanta of Swaminarayan is Navya Vishishtadvaita or Brahma Vishishtadvaita. Or there might be some other names that are more recently used. But to see the word Advaita is there. That word Advaita is referring to the one being. There's only one. And as its body, everything is existing as its body. Infinite Brahma, Vishnu, Shiv, infinite Jivas, infinite universes. Infinite universes are within just one tiny little pore. This as an analogy. It's like on the head of a pin you have hundreds of thousands of bacteria cells, something like that. So that is called Brahma Vishishtadvaita. So it is within the context of Brahma Vishishtadvaita that all of these answers are ultimately answered. But that's not a simple thing to grasp. Even conceptually it is difficult. Right now, what I would request anybody listening to this is just to stay with this notion that is there God? Is there the one supreme being that is beyond all of the creation. That is the creator. That is the one who is the cause of all creation. If you say yes, why are you saying yes? If you say no, why are you saying no? So if you go into what is called theology, there are the arguments for the existence of God, and there's arguments for the not existence of God. There's so many of those. We will review some of those also as we move along. Because there is so much to be said here. All I was trying to say here today is that sadhana is performed by those who are trying to please God. So that is actually the answer to this question, and we'll stop with this today. That sadhana performed with the me, the ego, is performed with resistance. There's always going to be resistance. That's what he's referring to, the difficulty of it, the word kathan. Because of the ego. But if the ego is not present, but it is performed in any religious tradition, simply to please the Lord, in any which way, that there's no me that is trying to do something. Whatever is being done is done just to please God. Prasannata. It is to perform sadhana to please God. Bhagwan ko prasanna karna, to please the Lord. Then the sadhana is not difficult. The sadhana is also not trying to get you somewhere. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna has stated, Daivi yesha gunamayi mama maya durattaya mam evaye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. That the Mahamaya is filled with the three gunas, and it is divine also. We will go into that further. It is a divine power, and the jiva is bound there. All he is saying in the Gita there, you come to me, I'll take care of it. You cannot cross the Maya by yourself. You have no power, doesn't matter how strong or intellectual or how many degrees or how many dissertations somebody's written or how much probing somebody has done, or tremendous kind of sadhana which is done by so many rishis in the past also. They reach powers, their yogic powers, so many things they can reach. But you can only reach to some extent. You cannot reach that supreme reality that is the Paramatma by any sadhana. That supreme being has to come to you by grace, krupa. So in Gujarati, in satsang, in Swaminarayan satsang, we say, Bhagwan krupa sadhya che, sadhan sadhya nathi, is very clear. So God is known through krupa, but that krupa occurs on the individual who has recognized what is God and is trying to please God. That's it. And in that way, there's no ego. And by the grace of God, all that God has to do is remove the influence of Mahamaya. It's it removes, but he only removes it for those who want it removed. He's not going to remove that Mahamaya under any circumstances for anybody who does not want that. If you want that and only that, it will happen. If you want something other than that, it won't happen also. And that is the Siddhant in the Vachanamrut. The word Siddhant means fundamental truth. I use that word here with the assumption that what Maharaj is speaking is the truth. So that is the meaning of the word Siddhant. That also should be understood clearly. The many perspectives are there. I'm trying to present this in objective way as much as possible from multiple angles, because any of these ideas have so much embedded within them. Just even the discussion about why pain and suffering exist in the world is called the problem of evil in theology. And there, Saint Augustine and many Christian saints have written, including C.S. Lewis, and a lot of these Christian thinkers and theologians have talked a lot about this. Same thing is there in the Eastern traditions where there is belief in God. The biggest criticism against belief in God is that there's two criticisms. One is that you're creating something false in your mind. This is one problem. This problem is also discussed in this very first Vachanamrut. And then the second criticism is that if there's so much pain and suffering and problem and all this dukkha is there, why God doesn't just remove that? That is the second biggest criticism against monotheism. Those questions are all answered in Vachanamrut, and we will get into that next time. All right, we'll stop here. Thank you all very much.